The moment my daughter-in-law laughed at my so-called investment dreams, I knew exactly which company I'd buy first. 5 minutes after dessert, her boss called her with devastating news about the acquisition. By the time the coffee was poured, she was quietly updating her LinkedIn profile for unemployment. She thought I was a naive old woman playing with fire. She had no idea I was the one holding the matches. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I love knowing who's out there listening. And if you know what it's like to be underestimated, stick around. This story is for you. Make sure you like and subscribe for more tales of quiet revenge and hidden strength. Let me take you back. 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning that smelled of cheap coffee and determination, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Sacramento. The Formica was chipped, the chair creaked, and my laptop glowed with possibilities that most people would never think to associate with a woman like me. At 60, the world expected me to be planning my retirement, maybe fussing over rose bushes or bridge games. Instead, I was knee-deep in investment forums, cryptocurrency white papers, and stock analysis charts. You see, I've always been what people politely call resourceful. Less politely, stubborn as a mule with twice the attitude. When my ex-husband Gary walked out 12 years ago, leaving me with our 8-year-old son, Danny, and a mountain of bills that seemed to breathe down my neck, everyone expected me to crumble. They offered pity, casseroles, and poorly disguised doubts. I accepted the casseroles. I used the pity as fuel. And I made those doubts my personal anthem. I rolled up my sleeves and became a master of the hustle. Night shift nurse, weekend catering assistant, freelance bookkeeper for 3 failing boutiques, substitute teacher on call, grocery store clerk with a smile so fixed my cheeks ached. You name the job, I've probably done it, not for passion but for purpose. For Danny, every double shift, every aching foot, every moment of swallowing my pride was a brick in the foundation I was building for him. He grew up watching me. He never saw me break. He learned, through silent observation, that when life kicks you in the teeth, you spit out the blood, stand up straight, and find a way to kick back. That kid, he absorbed my resolve like a sponge. He worked just as hard, earning scholarships that made my sacrificial savings look like pocket change. Now 20, he's a junior at UC Davis, studying engineering. Smart. Kind. And, as of 6 months ago, unfortunately married to Chloe Hartford. Yes, those Hartfords. The ones with the Silicon Valley tech money and a superiority complex, so ingrained it probably had its own family crest. Chloe was, on the surface, everything you'd expect. Blonde hair maintained with the budget of a small nation's GDP, clothes that whispered their designer names, a smile perfected in mirrors and country clubs. At 22, her greatest accomplishment was a degree in communication studies from a private college Daddy had endowed, and an unwavering belief that the world existed to serve her. When Danny first brought her home last Christmas, she'd glided into my modest 2-bedroom apartment like a visitor to a quaint, slightly disturbing museum. Her eyes did a swift, calculating inventory of my thrift store furniture, my DIY curtains, my world. How charming, she'd said, her voice a melody of condescension. I'd served her coffee in my best mug, the one without the chip. It's not much, I'd replied, sweet as pie, but the mortgage is paid. I saw the flicker in her eyes then, the first hint that my steal might not be so easily dismissed. Their wedding was a Hartford production, a spectacle that cost more than I'd earned in the last 5 years combined. Danny, bless him, tried to contribute, but was gently steamrolled by the Hartford machine. Everything had to be perfect for their princess. And that wedding, that glaring display of unearned opulence, was the final spark. It made me ask a dangerous question. Why was I still playing by the rules of scarcity? Which brings us back to that Tuesday morning. The catalyst was a YouTube video. A 30-year-old teacher talking about how she'd turned $5,000 into $50,000 in 6 months through smart, research stock picks, and a dash of crypto. She wasn't a Wall Street wolf. She was a teacher. Like I'd been a nurse, a clerk, a bookkeeper. If she could decode the market, why couldn't I? A lifetime of balancing budgets, of understanding the ebb and flow of small business finances, of spotting patterns in ledgers. It was all there. I just hadn't applied it to my ledger. That morning, with my cold coffee as a witness, I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I transferred $10,000, my sacred, never-touch emergency fund, into a new investment account. The fear was a physical thing, a cold rock in my stomach. But underneath it was a sharper, hotter feeling, certainty. The first week was pure terror. I started safe, grocery chains, utilities, healthcare. But I also allocated a small, daring slice to a tech stock my research flagged as undervalued. 2 weeks later, that slice had doubled. I stared at the screen, convinced it was a glitch.
But no.
$500 had become $1,000.
Just like that.
Money that would have required 20 grueling hours of work had materialized while I slept. That was the moment the world shifted on its axis. I dove in. And here's what the Hartfords, in all their privileged glory, never understood. My decades in the trenches weren't a weakness. They were my ultimate intelligence network. While Chloe was learning theory, I was learning reality. I knew which service companies treated employees well, and thus had low turnover and high productivity. I knew which retail chains were expanding based on supplier relationships I'd overheard. I knew which healthcare providers were efficient and which were bloated. My little jobs gave me a ground floor, operational insight no MBA could buy. For 3 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was Donna Johnson, frugal mother-in-law, driving her Honda Civic, clipping coupons, living small. By night and early morning, I was a strategic investor, my portfolio growing with a quiet, relentless momentum. I learned about crypto wallets, options trading, market sentiment analysis. The numbers began to tell a story that thrilled me. The 10,000 had become 50, then 100, then more. Much more. The beauty was in the silence. I told no one. Especially not Danny. I wanted to protect him from the hope and from the potential fallout if I failed. And I certainly didn't tell Chloe or her parents. Let them think what they wanted. Appearances, I'd learned, were the cheapest currency of all. So, have you ever had someone completely underestimate you? Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe. The best part of this story is yet to come. Thanksgiving at Danny and Chloe's new apartment was a stage set for a performance I'd seen rehearsed my whole life. Chloe had insisted on hosting, a chance to display the obscenely expensive dinnerware and minimalist designer furniture. All gifts from Daddy. I arrived promptly at 3, bearing my famous green bean casserole, a recipe born of necessity, perfected by love, and wearing my best dress. 5 years old, from the Macy's clearance rack. It was armor in its own way. Chloe answered the door, a vision of calculated casualness in cashmere. "Donna," she chirped, offering air kisses that missed my cheeks by a careful inch. "You made it." As if I'd had a competing invitation to the White House. I smiled, the one that didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you for having me, sweetheart." Danny emerged from the kitchen, and my heart did its usual flip. His hug was genuine, warm. An anchor in the sea of sterility. "Missed you, Mom." In his arms, every sacrifice felt worth its weight in gold. The apartment was a museum of wealth, cold, perfect, and utterly unwelcoming. Chloe's parents, Charles and Patricia Hartford, were already holding court in the living room. Charles offered a nod that felt like a tax deduction. Patricia's smile was so tight it could have cracked porcelain. "Donna," she purred. "You look nice." The pause was its own sentence.
Dinner was a tense ballet.
Chloe fluttered, stressed by the sacred responsibility of roasting a turkey. Danny tried to help, only to be swatted away. I offered my decades of cooking experience and was politely, firmly, relegated to the guest role. We finally sat at a table that probably cost more than my car. Danny valiantly steered conversation. Then Charles made his fatal error. "Donna," he said, sawing into his turkey with surgical precision. "Danny mentioned you've been taking some online courses? Computer literacy, for seniors?" He said it with the benevolent condescension of a king acknowledging the jester. I took a slow sip of water. "Not exactly, Charles. I've been studying investment strategies and market analysis. The silence was so profound I could hear the hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator in the next room. Patricia slowly set down her fork. Investment strategies? She repeated, as if I'd said I was training for the space program. Chloe couldn't contain her gleeful derision. Aren't you? I mean, isn't that a little ambitious? At your stage. Danny's head snapped up. Chloe, Mom has always been brilliant with money. Oh, I'm sure she's wonderful with a household budget, Patricia interjected, her patronizing smile firmly in place. But the markets are a different beast. They require sophisticated education, real experience. I felt a familiar, cold calm settle over me. You're absolutely right, Patricia. That's why I've been studying so intently. Financial analysis, portfolio management, blockchain fundamentals. Charles leaned in, his eyes twinkling with mockery. And? Made your first million yet? He chuckled, inviting the table to join him. Patricia tittered. Chloe's smile was a razor blade. I met his gaze squarely. Not quite a million, Charles. But the results have been encouraging. I'm sure they have, Chloe said, her voice dripping with faux concern. But honestly, Donna, wouldn't it be wiser to just preserve what you have? You've worked so hard for so long just to get by. It would be awful if you lost your little nest egg chasing some online get-rich-quick fantasy. She emphasized get by, turning my resilience into a poverty of ambition. Danny was furious. Chloe, that's enough.
What?
I'm being practical. She doesn't have the background for this. Patricia nodded sagely. The internet is full of people preying on those who don't know better, making it seem simple when it's really quite complex. I let their words hang in the air, tasting each one. The condescension, the absolute, unshakable certainty of their superiority. I nodded slowly, as if conceding. You might be right, I said softly. It is complicated. I could see the relief wash over them. The working-class woman had been gently corrected. Order was restored. Charles raised his glass. To keeping things simple and realistic. I raised mine, my smile perfectly placid. To realistic expectations. But my mind was elsewhere. 3 hours before this farce of a dinner, a notification had lit up my phone. A business alert about a small, struggling tech company called Precision Hospitality Solutions. A company that made restaurant management software. A company where, according to my very thorough research, Chloe Hartford had just been installed as the director of marketing, her first real job, a gift from a client of Daddy's. A company whose stock was undervalued. A company whose marketing department was a dumpster fire. A company that was, according to my sources, ripe for acquisition. As I ate dry turkey and endured their pity, a plan crystallized in my mind with absolute, chilling clarity. They wanted to talk about realistic expectations? I was about to redefine reality for all of them. What they didn't know was that while Chloe was learning to arrange flowers for her tablescapes, I'd been learning to dismantle empires. And the first brick I was going to pull belonged to her. The weekend after Thanksgiving, I became a woman possessed. My apartment was now a war room. Laptops, spreadsheets, financial statements, and legal pads covered every surface. My investment portfolio had swelled to a number that still made me dizzy, well into the 7 figures. The beginner's luck had been followed by meticulously researched, ruthlessly executed trades. But my primary focus was now singular, Precision Hospitality Solutions. I devoured every scrap of information. Their SEC filings showed solid bones, but weak leadership. Their customer reviews praised the software but lamented the recent tone-deaf marketing. Industry forums whispered about a frustrated founder looking for an exit. And then there were the internal memos, accessed through a premium business intelligence service I now subscribe to. They told the real story. Chloe Hartford, Director of Marketing, hired 6 months ago. In that time, marketing expenditures up 400%. Customer acquisition down 23%. 3 major restaurant chains had filed formal complaints about unprofessional and damaging promotional campaigns. Employee morale in her department was described as catastrophic. She was, by every objective measure, an unmitigated disaster. A spoiled child playing executive with her father's connections. It was Monday morning when the call came. A San Francisco business broker, Marcus Webb, his voice crisp and efficient. Ms. Johnson, regarding your inquiry into hospitality tech acquisitions, we have a motivated seller. Precision Hospitality Solutions. The owner wants out before year-end for tax reasons. The current management is underperforming. They need an owner with operational sense. I kept my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. What's the asking price? When he told me, I had to sit down. It was significant, but entirely within my means. A large chunk of my portfolio, but not all of it. The risk was calculated, the target clear. The sale would need to close by December 15th, Marcus added. That's not a problem, I heard myself say. The next 10 days were a blur of lawyers, accountants, and due diligence. I hired the best, a sharp corporate attorney named Sarah Chun and a detail-obsessed financial consultant, Michael Torres. They asked no questions about the source of my funds. The money was clean, liquid, and commanding. It spoke a language everyone understood. I met the weary founder, a man in his late 60s named Robert, who was desperate to retire and heartbroken by what had happened to his baby. The marketing, it's driving away our loyal customers, he confessed over a confidential coffee. The new girl, Hartford, all flash, no substance. Her father's a big client of our biggest investor. It was a favor. His disdain was palpable. We shook hands on the deal. He was selling to me not just for the money, but because I'd spoken knowledgeably about the industry, about the work. I'd earned his respect in a way Chloe never could. The closing happened on December 10th in a nondescript office building. I signed a forest of papers. With a final flourish, it was done. I owned Precision Hospitality Solutions. The senior management meeting was set for December 11th, 9 a.m. I selected my outfit with more care than I'd ever taken, a tailored, navy blue suit that whispered authority, not price tag. I walked into the sleek offices of my new company, my briefcase in hand, Sarah and Michael flanking me. The receptionist, a sharp-eyed young woman named Rebecca, greeted me. The team is assembled, Ms. Johnson. Excellent. Before I go in, may I have the current organizational chart and personnel files for the leadership team? As I stood there, holding the file with Chloe's name on it, I felt that old, familiar surge, the one before a night shift, before a difficult client meeting. The feeling of proving my worth. Only this time, I wasn't proving it to get the job. I was the one who'd created the test. I entered the conference room. 6 anxious faces looked up. And there, at the far end, sat Chloe. Impeccable in cream silk, a confident, slightly bored smile on her face. The new owner was just another corporate suit to manage. She hadn't looked up from her phone yet. Good morning, I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. I took the seat at the head of the table. I'm Donna Johnson. Thank you for your patience during this transition. Chloe's head snapped up. The color drained from her face so rapidly, I thought she might faint. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, scanned me, the hair, the suit, the posture of command. The recognition was a slow, horrifying dawn. I gave her a small, polite smile, the same one I'd used when she called my apartment charming. Then I turned to the interim manager. Shall we begin with departmental reports? One by one, the VPs presented. Operations, solid. Tech, innovative. Finance, conservative but healthy. Then it was marketing's turn. Chloe stood, her knees visibly unsteady. She launched into a presentation that was a masterpiece of spin. Failed campaigns became bold market experiments. Blown budgets were strategic investments in brand equity. The alienated clients? We're selectively focusing on a more premium demographic. She spoke a language of buzzwords and jargon, a hollow shell with nothing inside. When she finished, I steepled my fingers. Thank you, Chloe. A very aspirational overview. What specific, quantifiable ROI have these initiatives generated in the last quarter? She blinked. ROI on brand building is longitudinal. It's not just about immediate sales, it's about market positioning. I understand brand equity, I interrupted gently. But surely you track leading indicators? Customer acquisition cost? Lifetime value changes? Engagement metrics? She fumbled, citing vague social media growth and positive sentiment analysis. I nodded, making a note on my pad. Her eyes tracked the pen like a mouse watching a snake. The meeting concluded. As others filed out, I said, "Chloe, a moment, please." The room emptied. The silence was thick enough to choke on. She remained standing, her knuckles white on the chair back. "Do you know who I am?" I asked, though the question was purely rhetorical now. You're Donna Johnson, the new owner." Her voice was a whisper. "I'm Donna Johnson, Danny's mother, your mother-in-law." The words hung between us, solid and devastating. The investment course," she stammered, "wasn't a course. It was a strategy. And it worked well enough to buy this company." I leaned forward. "You advised me to stick to simple things, Chloe. Savings accounts. To leave the complicated business to people who understand. I've been thinking about that advice ever since Thanksgiving." She had no words. The utter collapse of her reality was happening in real time on her perfectly made-up face. "I'll be conducting a full review of all departments, starting with marketing. I expect your full cooperation. We'll need all your data, all your campaign analytics, all your vendor contracts. Everything." She just nodded, utterly broken. "You may go." She stumbled out. I didn't feel triumph yet. That would come later. This was just the first move. What would you have done in that conference room? Could you have kept a straight face? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And believe me, this is just the appetizer. The main course of consequences is still being served. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single course. The week following my introduction as the new owner was a study in quiet panic. I could feel it thrumming through the hallways of Precision Hospitality Solutions. The air was thick with speculation, and the marketing department moved like they were navigating a minefield. I made a point of being visible, walking the floors, asking questions of junior staff, sitting in on product meetings. I was assessing the true health of the company I'd bought, but I was also sending a message. The days of coasting on connections were over. I had my new assistant, Rebecca, a whip-smart former executive assistant I'd poached from a competitor, schedule one-on-one meetings with every department head. I saved Chloe for last. She arrived at my office door precisely on time, her armor back in place. The fear was still there, deep in her eyes, but it was now overlaid with a brittle defiance. She carried a thick, embossed binder. "Donna, Ms. Johnson," she corrected herself, forcing a professional tone. "I've prepared a comprehensive strategic roadmap for Q1, along with a detailed defense of the repositioning strategy you questioned." "Thank you, Chloe. Have a seat." I let her talk. For 20 minutes, she presented a vision that was all glittering surface, influencer partnerships, luxury brand alignments, a complete rebrand to appeal to high-end culinary experiences. It was a marketing plan for a company that made private jets, not restaurant inventory software. When she finished, I didn't touch the binder. I turned my computer monitor around to face her. On it was a single dashboard. Red numbers, downward trends, negative percentages. "This," I said quietly, "is the dashboard from your company-issued analytics login. Customer acquisition cost, up 340%. Client churn in the segment you targeted, up 18%. Employee turnover in your department, 60% in 6 months. Social sentiment, actually negative since your repositioning campaign launched." She stared at the screen, her mouth a thin line. "Those are raw numbers. They don't capture the brand vision we're building for the long term." "A brand is a promise of value," I replied. "Our software helps family-owned pizzerias and mid-scale chains manage their food costs and staff schedules. They don't need high-end culinary experience marketing. They need to know we're reliable, cost-effective, and understand their problems. You've been selling them a Ferrari when they need a reliable pickup truck. You've confused our customers and insulted our product." "My father," she began a reflexive defense. "Your father doesn't work here." I cut in, my voice firm but calm. "And his connections are what got you this job, which, it turns out, was a profound disservice to both you and this company. It prevented you from ever having to learn the fundamentals. The defiance cracked. Are you firing me? Not today. I'm giving you a mandate. I want a new plan on my desk in 48 hours. One that addresses our actual core customer. One that uses this data, I tap the screen, to diagnose the problems and propose real solutions. Not buzzwords. Solutions.
Can you do that? It was a test.
A cruel one, perhaps. I was giving her a rope. Would she use it to climb out? Or would she, as I suspected, tie it into a noose? She took the binder back, her hands trembling slightly. I can do that. Good. I look forward to seeing it. 2 days later, the document arrived via email. It was a rehash of the same ideas, just with the words cost-effective and practical sprinkled in like an afterthought. She had learned nothing. She had only tried to repackage her failure in the wrapping paper she thought I wanted. The noose was tied. Meanwhile, my life outside the office continued its parallel track. I had dinner with Danny. He was stressed, sensing the turmoil in his wife, but unable to pinpoint it. Chloe, apparently, had told him work was intense but amazing, and that the new owner was demanding but brilliant. The irony was almost painful. She seems really impressed with this Ms. Johnson, Danny said over pasta, unaware he was talking to her. Says she's tough but fair. It's weird, Mom. She's never respected a female boss before. I just smiled. Maybe she's growing up. But the real growth was happening in my investigation. My due diligence on the Hartford family hadn't stopped with Chloe's job performance. Charles Hartford's investment firm, Hartford Capital Partners, had always smelled faintly of roses that were a little too perfect. My business consultant, Michael, had deep contacts in regulatory circles. Donna, he said during one of our evening calls, you were right to be suspicious. Hartford's returns for his elite clients are consistently, almost unnaturally, high. The kind of high that either makes you a genius or a fraud. The SEC has had a passive eye on him for a while, but no one has ever come forward with concrete evidence. It's all whispers. What would they need? I asked, staring out at the Sacramento night. A whistleblower, or a detailed, documented pattern from a credible source showing intent to deceive. Client statements that don't match internal books, for example. I thought of the arrogance at the Thanksgiving table, the absolute certainty that their world was unassailable. Keep digging, Michael. Please. Chapter 5. The Termination. The Monday of Chloe's termination meeting dawned clear and cold. I dressed with intentional simplicity. This wasn't a performance for her anymore. It was an execution of duty. She arrived looking like she was attending a press conference for her own promotion. The binder was back, thicker this time. Chloe, thank you for coming. Please sit. I didn't sit behind my desk. I took the chair next to her, a small, deliberate gesture that made this personal, not just procedural. I reviewed your revised plan. I began. It's a repackaging of a failed strategy. It demonstrates a fundamental inability to listen, learn, or adapt. This isn't a matter of creativity or vision. It's a matter of competence. Her face hardened. That's a very harsh assessment. It's an accurate one. Supported by 6 months of data, client complaints, and internal reviews. I slid a folder across the table. This is your termination package. Your employment is ended for cause, effective immediately. The cause is gross mismanagement and sustained poor performance. The color left her face. The professional mask shattered. You can't do this. My father. Your father has no jurisdiction here. This is a business decision. This is revenge, she hissed, leaning forward. For Thanksgiving. For everything. I met her anger with glacial calm. This, Chloe, is accountability. Something you've managed to avoid your entire life. If I were seeking revenge, I'd have let you stay, let you run this department into the ground, and then fire you in a wider scandal that would follow you forever. Instead, I'm giving you a clean break. A chance to learn from this before your professional reputation is beyond repair. Tears of fury, not remorse, welled in her eyes. A clean break? How will I explain this? No one gets fired from their first job in 6 months. You didn't get fired from your first job, I corrected softly. You failed at it.
Spectacularly.
There's a difference. One involves circumstance. The other involves you. I stood up, a clear signal the meeting was over. Your personal effects will be boxed and sent to you. Security will escort you out. Your final paycheck will include accrued vacation. There is no severance for termination with cause. She remained seated, stunned into immobility. Danny, what will I tell Danny? The truth would be a novelty, I said, walking to the door. But I suspect you'll tell him a story where you're the victim. And for once, I won't contradict you. The facts will do that for me. Rebecca had already signaled security. 2 professional, impassive men appeared at the door. As they led a shell-shocked Chloe away, she turned one last time, the victimhood already solidifying into a new kind of spite. He'll choose me. You know that, right? He's my husband. I didn't reply. I just closed my office door and let out a long, slow breath. There was no joy in it, only the grim satisfaction of a necessary task completed. The first domino had fallen. What would you have said in that moment? Do you think she deserved that clean break, or should I have exposed her to everyone right then? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me where you're joining me from today. The fallout was immediate, and it landed first on Danny. He called me that evening, his voice strained with confusion and hurt. Mom, Chloe came home a wreck. She said she was laid off in a strategic restructuring. But she's devastated. She loved that job. I chose my words carefully, walking the tightrope between truth and maternal protection. Danny, the company was acquired. New ownership often means changes, sometimes very difficult ones. But she said the new owner, Ms. Johnson, seemed to have a personal issue with her from the start, that she never gave her a fair shot. I felt a pang. The lie was so effortless for her. Sweetheart, I can't speak to the new owner's motivations. But I do know that in business, especially after an acquisition, performance is everything. It's rarely personal. It feels personal to her, he sighed. And now her parents are involved. Charles is talking about legal recourse for wrongful termination. This is a mess. A cold finger traced my spine. Legal recourse. Of course. The Hartford's first and only language. Power and threat. Danny, listen to me, I said, my voice firm. Do not let them pull you into any legal discussions. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to be a character witness. This is between Chloe, her former employer, and the law. Your role is to be her husband, not her father's junior counsel. Promise me. The silence on the line told me he was in over his head. I promise, Mom. It's just they're so forceful. I knew that force all too well. You're strong enough to handle it, Danny. You always have been. The next 48 hours were a quiet storm. I focused on stabilizing the company, appointing the interim head of customer service, a woman who'd been with the company for 10 years and understood our clients intimately, to oversee marketing. Morale, outside the shell-shocked marketing team, actually began to improve. The Princess and the Pea era was over. Then, the letter arrived. Thick, cream paper from the law offices of Crawford, Eldridge, and Stone. It was a formal legal threat. Claims of wrongful termination, creation of a hostile work environment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It demanded my presence at a settlement conference in 1 week, along with a reinstatement offer and a substantial monetary settlement for damages. They were playing the bully, just as I'd expected. Charles Hartford thought he could scare the small-time, self-made woman into submission. He believed the cost of a legal fight would break me. He had no idea what was about to break him. I called my team, Sarah, my lawyer, and Michael, my consultant. We met that night at my apartment, now truly a command center. Their case is flimsy, Sarah said, tapping the letter. But flimsy cases can still be expensive and time-consuming. They're banking on you folding. I'm not folding, I said. But I'm not just playing defense. Michael, what do you have? Michael opened his laptop, his face grave. More than whispers now, Donna. I have a source, a former junior analyst at Hartford Capital who left under murky circumstances. He's scared, but he's angry. He provided templates, documents that show 2 sets of books, one with a spectacular returns for clients and an internal set that shows moderate gains at best. How does it work? I asked, leaning in. The classic Ponzi scheme structure, but dressed in bespoke suits. New investor money is used to pay returns to older investors. He's been shuffling funds between shell companies to hide the depletion of capital. The SEC would need this, Michael pointed at the files on a screen, and a credible narrative to connect the dots. We have the narrative, I said softly. A man who believes the rules don't apply to him, who uses his wealth to buy positions for his unqualified daughter, who, when challenged, immediately resorts to legal intimidation to silence critics. A man who would defraud retired doctors, family trusts, and charities to maintain his facade. Sarah looked at me, a new respect in her eyes. You're not going to the settlement conference to settle, are you? No, I said, a plan crystallizing with perfect, chilling clarity. I'm going to give Charles Hartford exactly what he wants, a confrontation. And I'm going to bring a war he never saw coming. I was no longer just a wronged mother-in-law. I was a shareholder, a CEO, and now an accidental prosecutor. And I had the evidence to bring down a dynasty. But would I use it? And what would it cost my son? The conference was in 1 week. The clock was ticking. Don't go anywhere. The confrontation is next, and you won't want to miss it. Like and subscribe. The morning of the conference arrived, cloaked in a San Francisco fog that matched the murky legal waters we were entering. Sarah Chun, my attorney, and I walked into the imposing granite and glass lobby of Crawford, Eldridge, and Stone. Every detail was designed to intimidate, from the silent, marble-floored atrium to the unsmiling receptionist who eyed my off-the-rack suit with barely concealed disdain. We were shown into a conference room that could have hosted a UN summit. At the far end of a table long enough to land a plane on, the Hartford faction was already assembled. Charles, radiating entitled fury in a Brioni suit. Patricia, a frozen sculpture of outrage in Chanel. Chloe, sitting between them, looked hollowed out, her eyes darting between me and her father. Their lawyer, James Crawford, was the picture of patrician confidence, his silver hair and tanned skin suggesting golf courses and guaranteed victories. Miss Johnson, Crawford began, not rising, his voice a dry legal document. We appreciate you coming to discuss this unfortunate matter. My clients are prepared to be reasonable. As am I said, taking the seat directly across from Charles. Sarah sat beside me, placing her briefcase on the table with a definitive click. Crawford slid a single sheet of paper toward me. This is our settlement offer. Withdrawal of all claims, reinstatement of Miss Hartford to her position with full back pay and a formal apology for the undue distress, and a payment of $1.5 million to compensate for reputational damage and emotional suffering. I glanced at the number, but didn't touch the paper. That's a very specific figure. It's a fraction of what we'd secure at trial, Charles snapped, unable to stay silent. Consider it a kindness, a way to make this unpleasantness go away before you're buried in legal fees you clearly can't afford. I smiled, a thin, polite curve of my lips. Thank you for your concern, Charles. But I've done my own calculations. I nodded to Sarah. She opened her briefcase and placed 3 identical, thicker folders in front of Crawford, Charles, and Patricia. This is our response. Crawford opened his eyes scanning the first page. His tanned face paled. This is proprietary financial data. Where did you get this? Due diligence, I said simply. When one is threatened with a lawsuit predicated on financial and personal malice, one looks into the source of the threat. It's only prudent. Charles snatched his folder, his eyes blazing over the contents. The pages contained summarized records of his dual bookkeeping, flow charts of money moving between his shell companies, side-by-side comparisons of client statements versus internal ledgers. It was a roadmap to prison. This is garbage, he roared, slamming the folder down. Fabricated nonsense. You think you can walk in here with this fantasy and threaten me? It's not a threat, Charles, I said, my voice still calm. It's context. You're alleging I acted with malicious intent in a business decision. I'm demonstrating that you, the primary motivator of this lawsuit, have a pattern of operating in bad faith on a scale that makes my personnel decision look like a parking ticket. Patricia was frantically paging through the folder, her composure crumbling. Charles, what is this? It's nothing, he insisted, but the sweat on his temple betrayed him. He turned to Crawford. This is inadmissible. It's stolen. Obtained through legal business intelligence services, Sarah corrected coolly. And we've already shared our concerns, along with supporting documentation, with the appropriate regulatory authorities. A formal SEC investigation into Hartford Capital Partners is likely to be announced by the end of the week. The silence that followed was absolute and deafening. The power in the room had just performed a perfect, irreversible coup. Chloe stared at her father, her face a mask of dawning horror. Her protector, her fortress, was made of sand. Crawford slowly closed his folder. He looked at Charles, not at me. You didn't disclose an SEC inquiry. Because there isn't one. Charles blustered, but the foundation was gone. There will be, I said, standing up. So, let's revise your settlement offer. Here are my terms. You withdraw all legal complaints against me and my company, permanently. You sign a binding agreement never to pursue any claim, legal or otherwise, against me or any member of my family. And you issue a public statement, drafted by my counsel, acknowledging that Chloe's termination was a straightforward business decision based on performance, and that your family regrets the misunderstanding. And in return? Crawford asked, his voice hollow. In return, I said, looking directly at Chloe's ashen face, I do not proactively release this information to the media. The SEC will do what it will with what it already has. But my silence on the matter and my recommendation to my source to cooperate fully with authorities is what you're buying. I was offering them a life raft in a hurricane I hadn't created, but had certainly revealed. Charles was drowning, and he knew it. You vicious, Charles began, but Patricia grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. Accept it, Charles, she hissed, her voice raw with a new fear, the fear of social annihilation. For God's sake, accept it. Charles Hartford deflated, the arrogant billionaire reduced to a cornered, frightened man. He gave a single, jerky nod to Crawford. We need to discuss the language, Crawford said weakly. You have 24 hours to agree to our draft, Sarah said, gathering her things. The clock started when we walked in. As we turned to leave, Chloe finally found her voice. It was a broken whisper. Danny. I paused at the door, looking back at the ruined family. Danny is my son. He's been caught in a crossfire he didn't create. What you tell him is up to you. But if you lie to him about this, about any of it from this moment on, you will answer to me. And I won't be using a lawyer next time. We walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. There was no victory chant, no sense of glee. Only the solemn quiet of a necessary, brutal battle concluded. The aftershocks rippled out quickly and violently. First, the Hartfords signed the agreement. The legal threat vanished. The promised public statement was a masterpiece of vague corporate apology, taking full responsibility for the unnecessary dispute and wishing Precision Hospitality Solutions every success under its new leadership. It was read by a junior PR person and reported nowhere. A tiny, insignificant death. The second tremor hit the society pages. Patricia Hartford suddenly decided to spend an extended period at their cottage in Nantucket. The separation from Charles was not yet public, but the Hive knew. The invitations would dry up. The third and largest quake was seismic. The SEC announced a formal investigation into Hartford Capital Partners for potential securities fraud. The financial news channels lit up. Charles's world collapsed in a matter of days. Assets were frozen. Clients fled, screaming for their money and finding only ghosts. The magnificent Hartford facade was exposed as a movie set. Through it all, Danny was the epicenter of my personal concern. He came to my apartment 3 days after the news broke. He looked exhausted, older, but his eyes were clear. She told me, he said without preamble, accepting a beer. Not everything, not the fraud stuff, but enough. That you owned the company, that you fired her, that her dad tried to sue you, and it backfired. I sat opposite him, my heart in my throat, and I asked her why you would do that. And she gave me this song and dance about you never liking her, about it being petty. So I called James Peterson, the old interim manager at Precision. My eyebrows rose. Danny had done his own due diligence. He told me about the 400% budget overruns, the lost clients, the department in revolt. Danny took a long swig. He said you were more than fair, that you gave her a chance to fix it. He said, and I quote, "Your mother showed more patience than I would have." He set the bottle down, his gaze steady on mine. So, I have 2 questions, Mom. How rich are you? And why didn't you tell me? This was the moment I dreaded and longed for. The end of the deception. The answer to the first question, I said slowly, is comfortable for life. It started with the emergency fund after your dad left. I invested it. I learned. I made some very good, very researched decisions. The company purchase was the biggest one. And the second question? I reached across the table and took his hand. Because I was protecting you. First from hope if I failed. Then from the burden of a secret. And finally from being a target. The money, it changes how people look at you. I wanted you to be looked at for you. To build your own life, your own work ethic, without the shadow of a sudden fortune. And I wanted to be sure, so sure, that anyone who loved you, not your potential inheritance. Tears welled in his eyes, but they weren't angry. They were understanding. Chloe never loved me, did she? Not really. I was a project. A noble choice from the good family. The acceptable rebellion. I didn't answer. He already knew. What happens now? He asked. That, I said, squeezing his hand, is up to you. But know this, you have a home with me, always. And you have a trust fund, set up years ago, that will be yours when you're 30. It's not Hartford money. It's Johnson money. Earned.
Clean.
Yours. He nodded, absorbing it all. The foundation of his young adulthood had been shaken, but I could see the stronger man emerging from the cracks. I need some time. To think. To figure out what I want. Take all the time you need. With the external threats neutralized, I turned my full attention to my company. Precision Hospitality Solutions needed more than a purge. It needed a new heart. I gathered the entire staff, all 85 employees, in the open-planned atrium. I stood before them, not on a raised platform, but on the same floor. My name is Donna Johnson. Many of you have met me. Some of you are probably terrified of me. A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. Don't be. I'm not here to slash and burn. I'm here to build. But we're going to build on a new foundation: competence, integrity, and respect. I laid out my vision. Refocusing on our core customer, investing in product development based on user feedback, and implementing a profit-sharing program so everyone benefited from our success. I announced the new director of marketing, Angela Rossi, the 45-year-old former customer service head, a woman who'd started in the mailroom and knew our clients' voices by heart. Then I made my most unexpected announcement. And I'm creating a new initiative, the Second Act Internship. We're going to actively recruit and train people who are changing careers later in life, people who bring decades of practical wisdom, resilience, and a work ethic forged in the real world. Because I've learned that experience isn't a liability, it's our greatest untapped asset. The applause was genuine, energized. The cloud of the Hartford era had lifted. Later, in my office, Rebecca handed me a sleek tablet. The first profiles for the Second Act program. You'll want to see the third one. I scrolled. There were former teachers, retail managers, a truck driver. Then I stopped. The application was from a Maureen Griggs, 58. Her profile photo showed a kind, tired face. Her work history, 30 years as administrative assistant at various firms, most recently laid off in a downsizing. Her stated goal: to learn data analysis. I've been organizing information my whole life. I want to learn how to make it tell a story. It was a humble, honest application. It was also, according to the notes Rebecca had dug up, from Patricia Hartford's older, estranged sister, the one who'd married a schoolteacher and been written out of the family ledger for lacking ambition. I looked at Rebecca. She gave a slight, knowing nod. "Schedule an interview," I said, a true smile finally reaching my eyes. Let's see what story she wants to tell. Revenge is a dish best served cold. But redemption? Redemption is a garden you plant for others, in the soil your enemies thought was barren. A year after the storm, the landscape of my life was unrecognizable, rebuilt not from the ruins of the Hartfords, but from the bedrock of my own choices. It was a Thursday evening in early autumn, and I stood on the deck of my new home, watching the first fireflies blink to life over the garden. The house wasn't a mansion, but a spacious, mid-century modern with clean lines and walls of glass that drank in the Sacramento Valley light. I'd bought it not for status, but for the way the sunrise flooded the kitchen, and for the big, fenced yard where a goofy, 50-pound rescue mutt named Barnaby now chased shadows. Inside, the sounds of a life lived fully drifted out through the open slider. The clink of bottles, the sizzle of vegetables on the grill, the warm weave of half a dozen conversations, and laughter, real, unforced laughter. I turned at the soft sound of the door. Maureen Griggs stepped out, holding 2 glasses of iced tea. In a simple linen shift, her silver hair in a soft bob, she looked more at peace than the timid applicant I'd interviewed a year ago. "Thought you might need a top-up," she said, handing me a glass. "Your son is a grill master. He's arguing with Elise about the proper char on a bell pepper. It's highly technical." I smiled, taking the drink. "He gets his stubbornness from me. And his good heart," Maureen added gently. She leaned on the railing beside me, looking at the gathering. "You built a good thing here, Donna. A real thing." The scene was a living portrait of my new normal. At the grill, Danny, tanner and more solid than the stressed young man of a year ago, waved a pair of tongs like a conductor. Beside him, Elise, her auburn hair tied in a messy knot, a smudge of sauce on her cheek, pointed at a pepper, arguing her point with energetic glee. She was all earthy practicality and sharp intellect, a world away from calculated perfection. She'd flown in from a mining survey in Alberta just for this. Angela Rossi, my marketing director, was gesturing animatedly to Michael Torres, my consultant, probably explaining some data-driven campaign. Her husband was deep in conversation with Rebecca, my assistant, about the best hiking trails in the Sierras. Barnaby wove happily between legs, accepting pats as his divine right. Maureen's gaze was soft. "You know, when I got the call for the interview after everything with my sister, I almost didn't come. I thought it was a cruel joke. Or pity. It was neither," I said. "It was good business. You had 30 years of making systems work, of managing chaos with grace. That's not a small skill. That's operational gold." She nodded, a slight tremor in her chin. "Working in accounting, learning the analytics software, it's like learning a new language to tell the story I already knew by heart. You gave me the vocabulary." She sipped her tea. "Patricia called me. After the sentencing." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. She was at the Nantucket house. She sounded small.
Not angry anymore, just lost.
She asked what I did all day. Maureen gave a quiet, incredulous laugh. I told her about my reports, about the profit-sharing bonus I got last quarter, about my book club. There was this long silence. Then she said, "It sounds very structured." And I realized she wasn't being catty. She was envious. Her whole life was an unstructured freefall now. All the money in the world, and she has no idea what to do with her days. The weight of her words hung between us. The ultimate defeat for Patricia wasn't poverty, it was irrelevance. "Did you tell her about the brownies?" I asked, nodding toward the platter inside, now half devoured. A genuine smile broke through.
No.
But I should have. Some victories are sweeter when you keep them to yourself. Danny's voice boomed across the deck.
Mom.
Maureen. Pepper debate settled. We're implementing a hybrid approach. Come and adjudicate the first bite. As we moved toward the group, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A news alert. I glanced at the headline. Fall of a Titan. Disgraced financier Charles Hartford begins 8-year sentence. I swiped it away without reading the article. That chapter was a closed book, its lessons learned, its poison drained. The meal was a loud, messy, delicious symphony. Plates were passed, stories traded. Elise's tale of outrunning a moose, Michael's disastrous attempt at golf, Angela's teenage son's latest robotics triumph. I watched Danny watch Elise, his gaze full of a quiet, unwavering certainty I'd never seen when he looked at Chloe. This was a partnership, not a performance. Later, as the fire pit was lit and marshmallows were produced, Danny slumped into the Adirondack chair next to mine, a contented sigh escaping him. Barnaby flopped heavily across his feet. Good party, Mom. The best, I agreed, toasting him with a final sip of wine. Elise loves the house. She said it feels lived in and loved. Highest praise from her. It does, doesn't it? I looked around at the flickering firelight on familiar, happy faces. It feels like a home, not a showcase. He was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. I saw the news alert about Charles. I did too. Does it feel like closure? I considered it.
No.
Closure happened a long time ago. In that conference room. In our kitchen when you asked me the truth. This. I gestured vaguely toward the phone in my pocket. This is just administrative cleanup. It doesn't touch this. I gestured to the fire, the people, him. He nodded, understanding. Chloe reached out. That got my attention. I stayed quiet. An email. She's well, she's not well. The influencer thing isn't working.
She's angry.
At him, at her mom, at me, at you. Mostly at herself, I think, but she can't name that feeling, so it sprays everywhere else. He poked the fire with a stick. She asked for money. What did you say? I said no. His voice was firm, without malice. I told her I couldn't help her financially, but that if she wanted a reference for a real job, a receptionist, an admin assistant, something with a structure she could learn, I would give her an honest one. I'd say she's organized, presents herself well, and is capable of learning. He looked at me. Was that cruel? I felt a surge of fierce pride. That was the kindest, most respectful thing you could have done. You treated her like a person, not a charity case or an enemy. You gave her a path to dignity, if she's brave enough to take it. He leaned back, the tension leaving his shoulders. That's what I thought. Thanks. Elise called him over to settle a debate about constellations. As he walked away, Rebecca came and took the vacant chair. All the reports are filed. The last quarter was our best yet, and your calendar is clear tomorrow, she said, her efficient tone belied by the relaxed smile on her face. You have officially achieved inbox zero, boss. A feat more miraculous than buying the company. I joked. She grew more serious. I got a call today. A headhunter. Massive salary bump. CFO role at a startup. My heart clenched, but I kept my voice even. Rebecca, that's incredible. You should take it. You've more than earned it. She grinned. I told them I wasn't interested. I said, I've already helped build one rocket ship from the ground up. I'd like to see how high this one can go. The gratitude that washed over me was profound. Thank you. Don't thank me. This. She gestured around. The second act program, the profit sharing, the fact that you know my kids' names and ask about my mother's arthritis. This is a company with a soul. That's rarer than a CFO title. And I think it's going to make us unstoppable. As the fire died down to embers and goodbyes were said, I found myself alone on the deck once more, holding a last glass of water. The cicadas hummed their night song. The lights of the city glittered in the distance, a tapestry of other lives, other stories. I thought about the journey, from the cold fear of transferring that first $10,000 to the heat of Chloe's contempt at Thanksgiving, to the sterile chill of the law office confrontation, to the warm glow of this fire. The money had given me options. The victory had given me safety. But this peace, this circle of genuine connection, this son who had emerged from the fog stronger and truer, this was the wealth. This was the dividend my resilience had paid. The French doors opened again. Danny, shrugging on his jacket. Heading out. Yeah, Elise has an early flight. I'm driving her back to her hotel. He hugged me, a long, solid embrace. Love you, Mom. Love you more, baby. He pulled back, his hands on my shoulders. You know, for a while I felt guilty that I'd brought her, that chaos, into your life. Danny, look around, I said softly. You brought you into my life. That's the only part that ever mattered. The rest was just weather. And we built a hell of a shelter. He kissed my cheek, a boy's gesture in a man's face, and left. I stayed out until the embers faded to gray ash, under a sky now dense with stars. The story wasn't a fairy tale. There was no prince, and the castle was one-eyed, wired, and plumbed myself. The villain wasn't vanquished in a duel, but undone by the weight of his own hollow choices. My story was better. It was real. It was mine.